I stood in the shadows outside the restaurant and watched my son toast his mother-in-law. He had cancelled our dinner, claiming a work emergency. Yet here he was, laughing over a cake that did not belong to me. The roast I cooked for my 60th birthday sat cold on my counter. They thought they had discarded me, but they had no idea I was holding the match. My name is Margaret Maggie Doyle, and I had spent the better part of the afternoon basting a roast that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I was turning 60 today. I lived alone in a small, weathered bungalow on the edge of Ridgeview, Colorado, a house that creaked in the wind but held the warmth of 40 years of memories. I had set the table for two. I ironed the good napkins. I even bought a bottle of red wine, the kind the clerk said went well with beef, just to celebrate with Aaron, my only son. Then the phone buzzed against the countertop. I wiped my hands on my apron and lifted the screen. The text message was brief, a glowing blue box that dismantled my evening in seconds. Urgent meeting with partners. Mom, please understand. I will make it up to you another day. Love you. I stared at the pot roast sitting heavy and brown in the center of the table. I wanted to be angry, but the habit of a lifetime washed over me. I told myself he was busy. He was successful. He was building a life at Northline Capital, and I should be proud rather than petty. But the silence in the kitchen was suffocating. I blew out the 2 tall candles I had just lit. I could not stay inside. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the cool evening air. My feet carried me toward downtown, a place of high-end boutiques and valet parking where I rarely ventured because I always felt I did not belong. I just wanted to see the lights. I wanted to be near people. I stopped in front of Luciano's, the most expensive Italian restaurant in the city. The golden light spilled out onto the pavement, warm and inviting. Through the large plate glass window, I saw a table near the center. My breath hitched in my throat. There was Aaron. Next to him sat his wife, Vanessa, in a shimmering dress, and across from them was her mother, Judith. They were not in a meeting. They were laughing. A waiter placed a cake on the table, not a birthday cake, but a sleek dessert with writing in chocolate that read, "To New Beginnings." I stepped back into the shadows of the awning, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The window was cracked open slightly to let in the evening breeze, and their voices drifted out. "Cheers," Aaron said, lifting his glass. Vanessa giggled, clinking her wine glass against his. "Let's just consider this the real birthday dinner for the family. Not her." The air left my lungs. It felt as though someone had reached inside my chest and squeezed. I was being erased. I was the obligation they had skipped to celebrate their real life. I did not storm in. I did not scream. I retreated into the darkness, walking all the way back to my silent house. The unlit candles in the kitchen looked pathetic now. But as I sat there in the dark, the tears stopped. A strange, cold calm settled over me. I knew what was coming. It was nearly midnight when the headlights swept across my living room window. They were here. Aaron and Vanessa walked in without knocking. They did not bring a gift. They brought a thick folder of documents and a nervous, aggressive energy that filled my small living room. "Mom, we need to talk," Aaron said. His voice was tight. "Happy birthday to me," I said softly, remaining seated at the dining table. Vanessa rolled her eyes, throwing the folder onto the table. "We don't have time for the guilt trip. Maggie, we need this signed. Tonight?" It was a power of attorney and a deed transfer. They wanted the house. They wanted to liquidate the only thing I had left to cover whatever hole they had dug for themselves. I am not signing this, I said. You don't understand. Aaron stepped forward, his face flushing red. We need the equity. It's just a signature. We'll move you into a nice apartment. It's for the family. No, I said, my voice steady. Aaron snapped. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin with bruising force. He hauled me up from the chair. You selfish, he hissed through gritted teeth. After everything I've done, you're going to ruin us over this pile of wood. Do it? Aaron Vanessa urged from behind him. Just make her sign it. Let go of me, I said. Aaron raised his hand and struck me across the face. The sound was a sharp crack in the silent kitchen. My head snapped to the side. Before I could recover, he hit me again. Harder. I fell back, crashing onto the linoleum floor. I tasted copper. Vanessa clapped her hands once, a hollow, mocking sound. Look at you, she sneered, looking down at me. You filthy old woman clinging to a house you're going to lose anyway. Just sign the damn paper. I lay on the floor, feeling the cold tiles against my cheek. My lip was bleeding. My ear was ringing with the force of the blow. Aaron stood over me, chest heaving, his hand raised for a third strike. Then, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, demanding sound that froze the room. Who the hell is that at this hour? Aaron cursed. He adjusted his shirt, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Probably some delivery you forgot about. Stay there. He marched toward the front door, confident, angry, and completely ignorant. He had no idea who was standing on the porch. He had no idea that I had not been just sitting in the dark waiting for them. I had been waiting for this exact moment. To understand why I lay on that linoleum floor, bleeding, you have to understand where we started. I was not always this old woman with trembling hands. Once, I was young in the industrial town of Milford, blinded by the stage lights reflecting off a saxophone. I married Jimmy, a musician with a smile that could melt winter snow, but a sense of responsibility that evaporated just as quickly. He was romantic until the bills came due. When Aaron was 6 years old, Jimmy packed his instrument case and left us for a gig in another state. He never came back. I was left with a child, a stack of overdue notices, and a terrified heart. We moved to Ridgeview, where I scraped together a life from nothing. I took a job as an administrative assistant at Harborline Family Services, a non-profit that helped families who were just as broken as mine. But one paycheck was never enough. My days were a blur of constant motion. From 9 to 5, I filed paperwork and answered phones. From 6 to 10, I pushed a heavy mop across the hallways of the local elementary school. On weekends, I took in laundry for the neighbours. My hands became rough and cracked, the skin around my knuckles permanently stained by bleach and cheap soap. My back ached with a dull, throbbing rhythm that never truly went away. Yet, every night, when I tiptoed into our rented room and saw Aaron sleeping, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm, I would whisper to myself, just so long as he does not have to live like this. I remember the winter he turned 8. He caught a severe case of pneumonia. I sat by his bedside in the public ward of the county hospital for 3 nights straight, watching the monitors beep, terrified that if I closed my eyes, he would stop breathing. When the pharmacy bill came for his post-discharge medication, I had nothing left in the bank. I walked to the pawn shop and sold the last thing of value I owned, my wedding band from Jimmy. It was a thin strip of gold, but it paid for the antibiotics. That night, Aaron looked up at me with fever-bright eyes, his voice raspy and weak. "Mom, when I grow up, I will buy you a hospital. A whole hospital just for you." I kissed his hot forehead. Weeping silently, I believed him. It took me 12 years of double shifts and skipped meals to save the down payment for this bungalow. It was old. The pipes groaned, and the insulation was thin. But it was ours. I planted the garden in the back with my own hands, digging into the earth until my fingernails were black, envisioning the flowers Aaron would see from his bedroom window. I built a sanctuary for him. But as Aaron grew, the gratitude began to curdle into something else. In his teenage years, he started asking me to drop him off a block away from school so his friends would not see my rusted sedan. He stopped inviting friends over. He threw away the lunches I packed because he did not want to be the kid with the homemade sandwich wrapped in wax paper. I saw the shame in his eyes, and it cut deeper than any paper cut, but I swallowed it. I became an expert at making excuses for him. When he skipped classes, I wrote notes to the principal claiming he was sick. When he blew his summer job earnings on trendy sneakers instead of saving for books, I told myself, he is just a boy. He is growing. As long as he studies hard, it is fine. I was watering the seeds of his entitlement, thinking I was nurturing his potential. When he was accepted into the finance program at a prestigious university in Denver, I was bursting with pride. The tuition was astronomical, even with financial aid. I took out a second loan. For a solid month, I ate nothing but instant noodles so I could send him $2,000 to buy a top-of-the-line laptop. I convinced myself that this machine was his ticket out of our poverty, and by extension, mine. I remember his graduation day as clearly as if it were yesterday. I sat in the bleachers, wearing a blue dress I had bought for my sister's wedding 10 years prior. It was slightly out of style, and the fabric was worn, but I felt like a queen. When Aaron walked across that stage, I cried until I could not see. Afterward, he found me in the crowd, smelling of expensive cologne and promise. He hugged me tight, lifting me off the ground. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "it is my turn to take care of you now. You are done working." I held on to him, burying my face in his graduation gown, believing every word. I believed my son, over and over again. I did not know then that every time I saved him, every time I sacrificed my own dignity to shield him from the world, I was feeding the very monster that would one day stand in my kitchen and strike me down. Things seemed perfect at first. After graduation, Aaron landed a junior analyst position at Northline Capital. It was a firm everyone in Denver respected, and the starting salary was more than I had made in my best year at the nonprofit. When he used his first end-of-year bonus to buy a shiny silver sedan, I took photos of it from every angle. I showed them to everyone at Harborline Family Services, beaming as I told Tasha, the young caseworker at the desk next to mine. "My son is going to run this city one day." Then he introduced me to Vanessa. She was a real estate agent, only 24, but possessing the terrifying confidence of someone who had never worried about an electricity bill in her life. She was beautiful, sharp, and ambitious. She came from a family that knew people, the kind of people who owned blocks of downtown rather than rented in them. The first time Aaron brought her to my house for dinner, the air felt different. I had scrubbed the floors and made my signature lasagna, But Vanessa seemed more interested in the architecture of my poverty than the food. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on the scratched wooden legs of the dining chairs and the slightly uneven hem of the tablecloth I had sewn myself. "It is certainly cozy," she said, offering a tight, polite smile. In a vintage sort of way. She did not mean it as a compliment. Soon after, I met her mother, Judith. Judith was a widow who owned a chain of high-end day spas. She was perfectly preserved, dripping in gold jewelry, and smelled of lavender and money. She was friendly enough, but her conversations always circled back to one thing: wealth. You have to have a modern financial mindset. "Maggie," Judith told me once over coffee, tapping her manicured nails on the table, "you cannot just let money sleep in a house. You have to make it work for you." I just nodded, feeling small. The wedding took place 6 months later at a resort in the mountains. Judith paid for nearly everything, which meant Judith made every decision. I contributed what I could, a few $1,000s from my savings, but it was a drop in the ocean compared to the floral budget alone. On the big day, I found myself pushed to the periphery. In the photos, I am there, but always slightly out of focus, standing behind Judith and her friends, looking like a distant aunt rather than the mother of the groom. For the first few months after the honeymoon, Aaron still called me every week. He talked excitedly about the luxury condo they had purchased downtown and the real estate investments he and Vanessa were planning. I listened, terrified by the amount of debt they were taking on, yet trusting his degree and his confidence. But slowly, the calls became shorter. The warmth evaporated. Every time I suggested coming over to see their new place or to cook dinner, Aaron would hesitate. "I have to check Vanessa's calendar. Mum," he would say, "we are so incredibly busy right now." My son, who used to text me the moment he woke up, now needed an appointment to speak to me. One Saturday, loneliness got the better of me. I baked a batch of the oatmeal cookies Aaron loved and took 2 buses to their condo complex. I thought it would be a nice surprise. When I rang the buzzer, Vanessa answered the video intercom. Her voice was sharp. "Maggie, is everything okay? You didn't call." When they finally buzzed me up, the apartment was immaculate, looking more like a showroom than a home. Aaron stood in the middle of the living room, looking uncomfortable. He did not hug me. "Mom, look, it is great to see you," he said, glancing at Vanessa, who was checking her watch. "But we actually have guests coming in 20 minutes, former clients of Judith. We really need to get the place ready." I stood there holding my tin of cookies, feeling foolish. "I just wanted to drop these off." I stammered. "Thanks," he said, taking the tin without opening it. "Maybe next time, just text first. It is just professional courtesy." I took the bus home, staring out the window as the city blurred by. I began to realize my new role. I was invited over only when they needed someone to watch the condo while they traveled, or to prep food for a party I was not invited to attend. I became a utility. Yet, I told myself, he has a wife now. He has a new life. I must not be a selfish mother. Then came the first request for money. Aaron called me late on a Tuesday. His voice hushed. He told me Vanessa had tried to day trade some cryptocurrency and had lost a significant chunk of their liquidity. They were short on a mortgage payment. "It is just $5,000. Mom," he whispered. "Just until my bonus clears next month. Please." Vanessa is freaking out. I did not have $5,000 lying around. I had to dip into my emergency fund, the money I was saving for a roof repair, but I transferred it within the hour. He promised to pay me back in 3 weeks. It took 7 months. And when he finally did, there was no apology. Just a casual transfer and a text that said, "Thanks for the help." I looked at my bank account, then at the water stain growing on my ceiling, and I forgave him. I told myself, he is just a victim of the times. The economy is hard. I did not want to admit that the boy who once promised to buy me a hospital was now the man bleeding me dry. The turning point arrived in a cream-coloured envelope from a lawyer in Redwood Falls. My great-aunt Clara had passed away, leaving me her only remaining asset, a dilapidated wooden cabin overlooking the lake. I had not been there in 20 years, and I remembered it as a drafty place with raccoons living under the porch. I expected nothing from it, perhaps a tax burden I could not afford. But Redwood Falls had changed. It was now a trendy escape for the wealthy. A development company contacted me within 48 hours of the funeral. They did not want the cabin. They wanted the land. Their offer made my knees weak. They were willing to pay $588,000. I had never seen a number like that in my life. To a woman who clipped coupons to save 50 cents on detergent, this was not just money, it was safety. When I told Aaron, his face lit up with a brightness I had not seen since he was a child. He hugged me, squeezing my shoulders. "Mom, this is it," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. "This is your chance to retire early. You can finally live for yourself." I teared up, thinking he was relieved that his mother would no longer be scrubbing floors. I was wrong. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the potential. That weekend, Vanessa laid out the plan. She called it the Golden Homestay Project. It is simple math. "Maggie," she said, spreading blueprints across my coffee table. "We use the cash to buy 3 distressed properties in the historic district. Aaron handles the financing structure. I handle the contractors and the flip. You just stand as the primary investor. We do the work, and you collect the passive income." I hesitated. I wanted to put the money into a boring, safe savings account. I wanted to know that if I got sick, I could pay for it. Then came the dinner at their condo with Judith. Judith sipped her wine and looked at me with a pitying smile. "Maggie, dear, inflation is eating cash alive. When my husband passed, I took his insurance money and doubled it in 5 years. Leaving $500,000 in a bank account is, well, it is negligent." I looked around the table. Aaron, Vanessa, and Judith all looked at me like I was a frightened child who refused to get into the swimming pool. I did not want to be the uneducated mother holding her brilliant son back. I did not want to be the burden. "Okay," I said softly. "I will look into contributing a portion for the first house." The sale of the cabin closed a month later. When I checked my balance at the ATM, the screen showed $588,000. I stood there in the parking lot, clutching the receipt, feeling a mix of nausea and elation. I thought of the families at Harborline who fought over $10 for bus fare. I felt guilty for having it, and terrified of losing it. 2 days later, Aaron arrived with a thick stack of papers. He was in a rush, checking his phone every 30 seconds. "Standard capital contribution agreement," he said, flipping to the back pages. "I highlighted where you need to sign. We need to move fast because the seller of the first property has another offer." The text was small and dense. Legal jargon about limited liability and managing partners swam before my eyes. My reading glasses were in the other room, but Aaron was tapping his pen against the table, vibrating with urgency. "Aaron," I asked, pausing with the pen hovering over the line. "I still keep the rights to my own house." "Right. This is just for the new properties." "Of course, Mom," he said, laughing as if I had asked if the sky was blue. "Your house is yours. This is separate. Trust me." I signed. The next morning, I went to the bank and authorized a wire transfer of $350,000 to a joint business account managed by Aaron and Vanessa. As the teller stamped the paper, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine, a quiet internal alarm that I forcefully silenced for weeks. They sent me updates via email, beautiful 3D renderings of renovated kitchens, spreadsheets showing projected rental yields, and photos of lumber stacks. Money is tight because supply chains are a mess. Aaron told me over the phone when I asked why the first renovation was taking so long. "But every cent is going into materials and specialized labor. You are going to be amazed." I wanted to believe him, but the silence in my gut had turned into a low growl. One Tuesday afternoon, I left work early. I drove to the address of the project house they had allegedly purchased with my money. I expected to see a construction crew, dumpsters, and the skeleton of a new porch. I pulled up to the curb and cut the engine. The house sat in silence. The windows were boarded up with plywood that had turned grey with age. The yard was waist-high in dead weeds. There were no trucks, no lumber, no workers. The only sign of activity was a faded placard stuck in the dirt that read, "Pending municipal approval," a sign that looked like it had weathered 2 winters already. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My son had told me the money was running into materials. But looking at this rotting house, I realized the money had not gone into wood or stone. It had gone somewhere else entirely. The rot began to show not in the rotting wood of the unfinished house, but in the gleaming polish of Vanessa's new life. A week after I visited the silent construction site, Vanessa pulled into my driveway in a pearl-white SUV that looked like a spaceship compared to my old sedan. She carried a designer handbag with a gold logo I recognized from magazines I could never afford. Then came the photos online. She and Aaron were in Mexico, standing on a white beach with cocktails in their hands, tagged as a market research trip. When I called Aaron, my voice trembling, he laughed as if I were a toddler asking why the sky was blue. "It is a marketing expense, Mum," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Investors and clients need to see success to trust us. If we look poor, nobody buys. You have to spend money to make money. Just relax." "Okay, it is all for the project." I hung up, feeling small and foolish. The next day at Harborline Family Services, I was staring blankly at my computer screen when Tasha rolled her chair over. She was young, sharp, and dealt with financial abuse cases daily. She had heard me whispering on the phone. "Maggie," she said softly, "you mentioned Aaron started a business with your capital. Do you have the paperwork handy?" I hesitated, but the knot in my stomach was too tight to ignore. I pulled the photocopied agreement from my purse. Tasha read it in silence, her brow furrowed deeper with every page. Finally, she looked up, and her eyes held a pity that terrified me. "Maggie, look at this clause," she said, pointing to a dense paragraph of legal text. "It says, 'The managing partners,' meaning Aaron and Vanessa, have sole and absolute discretion over all funds And here, it says profit distributions only occur after full recovery of initial capital and undefined operating expenses. Basically, they can pay themselves salaries, travel fees, and car leases as operating expenses forever. You might never see a dime of profit legally. The room spun. I felt nausea rise in my throat. I tried to snatch the paper back. No, I stammered. Aaron wouldn't. He's my son. He just uses standard forms. It is a predatory contract. Maggie, Tasha said gently. I went home and paced the kitchen floor until 3 in the morning. I was fighting a war inside my head. One side screamed that I had been swindled. The other side whispered that a mother who suspects her own child is a monster is the real monster. I decided to ask for proof. The next time I saw Aaron, I asked to see the invoices for the lumber and the contractor bids. He did not show them. Instead, his face turned a dark, ugly shade of red. "Are you serious?" he snapped, throwing his hands up. "You are obsessed with control. Mum, I am working 18 hours a day to build something for us, and you treat me like a criminal. You are embarrassing me. If Vanessa knew you didn't trust me, it would destroy her." I retreated, apologizing, terrified of losing his love. 2 nights later, Vanessa came to my door. She was alone. She did not come in to sit. She stood in the entryway, wearing a trench coat that looked like it cost more than my car. Her smile was gone. Her eyes were cold, hard flint. "Aaron told me you are having anxiety about the investment," she said. Her voice was level, devoid of warmth. "Let's be clear. Maggie, if you want out, you can't get out. You signed the agreement. The money is committed. I just want to see where it is going," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Vanessa took a step closer. The scent of her expensive perfume was suffocating. "You are distracting Aaron. He can't focus on the business because he is too busy managing your insecurities. Do you want him to fail? Is that it? Are you so afraid of being left alone that you want to sabotage his future just to keep him dependent on you?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. She had found my deepest, darkest fear, that I was a burden, a heavy anchor around my son's neck. "No," I said. "I want him to succeed." "Then back off," she hissed. "Let us do our jobs, or you will be the reason he loses everything." She left without saying goodbye. I stood in the hallway, shaking. I was trapped between the terrifying reality of financial ruin and the emotional blackmail of being a bad mother. I chose silence. I told myself to wait a few more months. Maybe the house would get built. Maybe Tasha was wrong. Maybe I was just an old, paranoid woman. The next morning, I went to the bathroom to wash my face. I looked up into the mirror and froze. The eyes staring back at me were dull, frightened, and hollow. They were the exact same eyes I saw every day in the faces of the elderly women who sat across from my desk at Harbourline. Women who had been stripped of their dignity by the people they loved most. I had become one of them. It was a rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon when the final veil was lifted. I was filing case folders at the office, the rhythm of the rain against the window matching the dull ache in my chest, when a woman I did not know walked in. She was dressed in a raincoat that cost more than my monthly salary, shaking a wet umbrella. She looked out of place in our fluorescent-lit waiting room, scanning the area until her eyes locked on mine. "Margaret Doyle?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, my name is Elise," she said. Her voice lowered. "I am an acquaintance of Judith and Vanessa. We need to talk." We sat in a small consultation room. Elise looked uncomfortable, twisting a diamond ring on her finger. She told me she had been at a cocktail party the previous weekend, a celebration for Judith's birthday. I debated coming here, Elise said, looking down at her hands. But I couldn't sleep after what I heard. You need to know who you are dealing with. She pulled out her phone and swiped to a photo. It was a candid shot of Vanessa and Judith holding champagne flutes, laughing with their heads thrown back. Judith was bragging to the group. Elise said softly. She told everyone. My daughter is brilliant. She squeezed the inheritance out of that poor mother-in-law and made the old woman say thank you for the privilege. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went cold. Elise continued, her voice trembling slightly. Then Vanessa chimed in. She said, Old money is the best money because they never spend it anyway. You just have to make them feel guilty about being a burden, and they will sign anything. The words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. I sat there, paralyzed. It was not just greed. It was sport. I was their entertainment. They were not struggling business owners trying to make it work. They were predators laughing at their prey over expensive wine. There is more, Elise said. Judith did this before. Years ago, with her late husband. She was almost sued for financial manipulation before he died. But she has a very expensive legal team. These women, they know exactly where the legal lines are, and they know how to dance right on the edge of them. After Elise left, I sat in the empty room for a long time. The humiliation was a hot, corrosive acid in my stomach. For the first time in my life, the sadness was replaced by a cold, sharp anger. I had spent my life sacrificing for Aaron, and to them, I was just a foolish old woman to be milked and mocked. I walked straight to Tasha's desk. I need help, I said. Tasha did not ask questions. She made a call immediately. An hour later, I was sitting in the cramped, book-filled office of Daniel Cortez, a lawyer who specialized in elder law. He was a small man with intense eyes and a suit that had seen better days. But Tasha swore he was a pit bull in court. Daniel listened to my story, read the predatory contract, and looked at the notes I had taken from Elise's visit. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his chin. Here is the hard truth. Maggie, Daniel said. Legally, that contract you signed is ironclad. They trapped you. If we sue now, based on what we have, we will lose, and they will drain whatever you have left in legal fees. My heart sank. So there is nothing I can do. I didn't say that. Daniel said, leaning forward. We need to prove a pattern of elder financial abuse. We need to prove coercion, threats, or fraud. Right now, on paper. You are a willing investor. We need to catch them acting like predators. He looked me dead in the eye. If they are bleeding you, they won't stop at the inheritance. They will come back for more. They always do. They will want the house, or your pension, or credit cards. And when they do, they will get desperate. You want me to wait for them to try to rob me again? I asked, my voice shaking. I want you to wait for them to show their true faces, Daniel corrected. Don't confront them yet. Gather evidence, record conversations if you can. Let them think you are still the compliant, guilty mother. The moment they cross the line into threats or fraud, we nail them. For the first time, I heard the term elder financial abuse applied to me. I had spent years helping others in this situation, never thinking I would see my own reflection in their stories. It was a painful, shameful realization. but it was also clarifying. I went home that night and opened the drawer where I kept my most precious keepsakes. I took out Daniel's business card. I placed it next to a framed photo of Aaron when he was 7 years old, holding a toy guitar, smiling with innocent, unconditional love. I looked at the boy in the photo, then at the lawyer's card. The boy was gone. The man who replaced him had laughed while his wife called me a burden. I ran my thumb over the photo one last time, then closed the drawer. If you choose to stand with them, I whispered to the empty room, then I have to stand with myself. Just as Daniel predicted. The call came 3 days later. It was Vanessa. She skipped the pleasantries, her voice tight with a manufactured panic. "Maggie, we have a crisis," she said, the word sharp enough to cut glass. "The zoning permits hit a snag. We need more liquidity immediately to grease the wheels, or the whole project collapses. We need $200,000. I held the phone away from my ear, staring at the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. 200,000, Vanessa. I don't have that kind of liquid cash left. Then you need to leverage the house, she snapped, then quickly softened her tone, dripping with poison honey. Look, Maggie, if this falls through, Aaron loses everything. His reputation in this town will be destroyed. You don't want your son to be known as a bankrupt failure, do you? I need to think, I stammered, playing the part of the confused old woman. Don't think too long, she warned. We need an answer by the weekend. I hung up and immediately dialed Daniel within the hour. I was sitting in a nondescript sedan parked 2 blocks from my house, sandwiched between Daniel and a man introduced as Detective Miller from the county's Financial Crimes Division. They are escalating, Miller said, his face grim. The threat to your son's reputation is the hook. Now we need the catch. He handed me a small plastic bag containing what looked like a standard white electrical outlet cover. This is a recording device. Install it near your dining table. It has a 12-hour battery life. And install this app on your phone. He pointed to a generic-looking weather icon on my screen. If you feel unsafe, press the cloud icon 3 times. We will be listening. The next evening, Aaron arrived. He carried a leather portfolio and a strained smile. He spread color-coded spreadsheets across my kitchen table, pointing at columns of red numbers. It is just a bridge loan. Mom, he said, tapping the paper. See, the projection shows we pay you back with 15% interest in 6 months. I looked at the colorful charts, seeing them for what they were, props in a con. Aaron, I asked, keeping my voice trembling. I drove by the site. Why hasn't the roof been fixed yet? His smile vanished instantly. His jaw tightened. Mom, I told you. Permit delays. Stop asking questions you don't understand. This is family money. You are a silent partner. That means you stay silent. I looked down at my hands. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about dying and not having enough money for a coffin. The anger in his eyes softened, replaced by a pity that was even harder to stomach. He reached out and squeezed my hand. Mom, trust me, I will never let you end up on the street. I promise. It was the same promise he had made to a client on the phone a month ago, right before selling them a high-risk bond that I knew had tanked. Okay, I whispered. Let me look at the numbers. When he left, he sat in his car in my driveway for 10 minutes. He thought he was safe. He did not know that Detective Miller had secured a warrant for a wiretap on his phone that morning. Later, Daniel played the recording for me in his office. She is wobbling. Aaron's voice crackled through the speaker. I think she will sign over the deed if we push a little harder on the guilt. Good, Vanessa's voice replied, tinny and cold. Get the house, liquidate it, and we can clear the debts here. Then we move to Arizona before the winter. If the old hag doesn't sign, we are screwed. Hearing my son call me the old hag should have broken my heart. Instead, it calcified it. The last remnants of maternal excuses turned to ash. We need a trigger event, Daniel said, turning off the tape. We need to get them both in the room, with the papers, making the threats on your recording device. That is enough for an arrest on attempted fraud and elder abuse. My birthday, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, flat and metallic. It is in 3 days. They forgot, of course. But if I invite them, if I tell them I am ready to discuss the financial arrangement, they will come. I sent the text that evening. Aaron, Vanessa, I don't want to be a burden anymore. Come for dinner on my birthday. We can finalize the paperwork for the house. I just want peace. The reply came in seconds. We will be there. Love you, Mum. The night before the dinner. The house was quiet. The recording device blinked once, a tiny red eye in the outlet cover, before going dark. I stood in the bathroom, gripping the edges of the sink. I was terrified. I was walking into a cage with 2 wolves, armed only with a wire and a broken heart. But I knew that if I faltered now, if I let them take this house, I would lose more than a roof over my head. I would lose the last shred of my self-respect. I looked into the mirror at my bruised reflection, the wrinkles, the grey hair, the face of a woman who had given everything until she was hollow. I took a deep breath. No, I said to the reflection. It was weak. I tried again, louder. No. I stared into my own eyes, searching for the steel that had allowed me to survive poverty, widowhood, and loneliness. It was still there, buried deep. No, I said, my voice finally steady and hard. You will not take anything else from me. The morning of my 60th birthday arrived with a silence so profound it felt heavy. My phone chirped a few times with messages from my sister in Ohio and a kind gif from Tasha at the office. But the one name I was waiting for never appeared on the screen. Aaron remained silent. I dressed slowly, putting on a brave face for no one, and walked to the local market. I bought a small cut of beef, a bottle of red wine that cost $12, and a small vanilla cake from the bakery section. I asked the girl behind the counter to write Happy 60th, Maggie, in blue icing. She looked at me with a soft, sad smile as she handed over the box, but I held my head high. I was not just buying dinner, I was buying the props for a play. By 3 p.m, the atmosphere in my quiet neighborhood had shifted imperceptibly. Daniel and Detective Miller were parked in a grey sedan around the corner. My phone buzzed. We are testing the audio feed, Maggie. Daniel's voice came through, sounding tinny and distant. Say something near the table. I stood over my dining table and smoothed out the tablecloth. I am here, I said to the empty room. Is this loud enough, loud and clear? Daniel replied. Remember, the moment you feel threatened, or the moment they admit to the fraud, you press the cloud icon 3 times. We will be through that door in under 30 seconds. I spent the next hour setting the stage. I laid out the good silverware. I used the old linen tablecloth, the one with the faint purple stain near the center where Aaron had spilled grape juice when he was 10. I used to scrub that stain with frustration. But today, I traced the outline of it with my finger. It was a ghost of a time when his biggest mistake was a spilled glass, not a stolen future. At 6 in the evening. My phone finally lit up with a message from Aaron. I picked it up, expecting the generic birthday wish. Instead, I read Vanessa booked a table for a celebration regarding the new contract. Can't make dinner. Sorry. Mom. I will make it up to you another day. I stared at the screen. A year ago, this would have crushed me. Today, I felt a cold, bitter amusement. They were keeping me on the hook, making sure I felt neglected, so I would be desperate for their attention later. I could not sit in the house. I needed to move. I put on my coat and walked toward downtown, drawn by a masochistic need to see the truth with my own eyes. I found myself standing outside Luciano's, shivering in the cool evening air. Through the glass. The scene was exactly as I had imagined, yet infinitely more painful. The candlelight danced on their faces. Aaron looked handsome in his suit. Vanessa was radiant. Judith was holding court. I stepped into the shadow of a brick pillar and cracked the window open just an inch. To new beginnings, Judith said, lifting her glass high, and to finally shedding the dead weight of the past. Aaron clinked his glass against hers. It will all be done tonight or tomorrow, he said, his voice carrying that smooth, corporate confidence I used to admire. Once she signs the leverage agreement, we are in the clear. Just make sure she doesn't cry too much. Vanessa laughed, taking a bite of her appetizer. I hate it when she does that martyr act. I stood there for a long moment. Every word was a nail driven into the coffin of my motherhood. I did not cry. The tears I had shed over the last few months had been for a son who apparently ceased to exist years ago. I turned around and walked home. The rhythm of my heels on the pavement sounded like a drumbeat. Back in my kitchen, I went to work. I wiped the street dust from my face. I changed into a dark wool sweater. Then, I walked around the living room and gathered every framed photograph of Aaron, the graduation picture, the shot of him on his first bicycle, the portrait from his wedding. I placed them all face down in the bottom drawer of the china cabinet. I could not have those eyes watching what I was about to do. I sat at the table, the unlit candles standing like sentries, and typed a message to Aaron. I chose every word with the precision of a surgeon. If you still want to talk about the papers, I am awake. The door is unlocked. I hit send. Minutes later, Daniel texted, "We are ready. Patrol units are holding at the end of the block. Stay calm." I set the phone down next to the cake. The house was silent, but it was a charged silence, like the air before a thunderstorm. I lit the candles. The flame flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. I sat in the dark, listening to the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, waiting for the wolves to come, knowing this time the sheep had brought the slaughter. The front door burst open just before midnight. They did not knock. A gust of wind followed them in, carrying the scent of expensive bourbon, rain, and heavy floral perfume. It clashed violently with the smell of the cold roast beef sitting in the kitchen, creating a sour, suffocating atmosphere in the small kitchen. Aaron stumbled slightly as he crossed the threshold. His eyes fell on the small vanilla cake with the unlit candle sitting in the center of the table. He let out a noise that was half laugh, half groan. "Mom, seriously, you still do these little sympathy parties for yourself?" Vanessa did not even look at the cake. She marched to the dining table, her heels clicking like gunshots on the hardwood, and dropped her heavy leather briefcase. "Let's get to work," she said, her voice dry. It is late, and we have a morning flight. I gestured for them to sit. My hands felt cold, but I forced them to be steady as I poured 3 glasses of the cheap wine. I sat opposite them, right above the electrical outlet. "The loan," I said, keeping my voice level. "Explain this restructuring package again, the one you mentioned on the phone." Vanessa pulled a document from the bag and slid it across the table. It was heavy. "It is standard collateralization. We use the equity in this house to bridge the gap for the zoning permits. Once the project clears, we release the lien. Simple." I put on my reading glasses, though I already knew what the paper said. It was a death warrant for my home. I looked up at Vanessa. "Where is Judith's name?" I asked. "You said your mother was a partner. Her name is nowhere on this liability clause." Vanessa waved her hand dismissively, looking away. "She is a silent partner. It is a different tax bracket. I don't see her putting her house up." I pressed. Aaron slammed his wineglass down. Red liquid sloshed onto the tablecloth, bleeding into the fabric. "Stop it," he barked. His face was flushed, his eyes glassy. "God, why do you always do this? Why do you always dig and scratch? You don't trust me. That is it, isn't it? You want me to kneel down and beg. You want me to thank you for every scrap you ever gave me." The tiny red light on the recorder under the table was invisible, but I felt its heat. I looked him in the eye. "I am not signing another cent until I see exactly where the first $350,000 went. I want bank statements. Tonight." Vanessa leaned forward, her face twisted into a mask of cruelty. "Oh, Maggie, wake up. Who do you think is going to take care of you when you get too old to walk us, or this rotting pile of wood you call a house? You are investing in your caretakers." Aaron stood up abruptly. He began to pace the small kitchen like a caged animal. He spotted my blood pressure medication on the counter. He snatched the bottle up and shook it near my face. The rattle was loud and sharp. "These pills cost a fortune." "Mom," he sneered. "Without me handling things? Without my success? How long do you think you will last? You are a leech. You have always been a leech." He threw the bottle hard onto the table. It cracked. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I did not look away. "That is exactly why I cannot lose this house," I said. "I will not sign." The room went deadly silent. Vanessa stood up and walked behind Aaron's chair. She leaned close to his ear, but she spoke loud enough for the air to carry it and for the device to catch it. "If you don't be a man right now, Aaron," she hissed, "she's going to drag you to the bottom. She will ruin us. Fix it." It was the spark in the powder keg. Aaron roared. He lunged across the gap between us. His hand clamped onto my shoulder, his fingers digging into the muscle with bruising force. He yanked me up from my chair and slammed me back down, shoving the paper under my nose. "Sign it," he screamed. His face was inches from mine, his breath hot and smelling of liquor. "You owe me this. I am your son. This is just payback for the years of embarrassment, no," I said. Crack. The sound was like a whip. My head snapped to the right. The sting on my cheek was instantaneous and blinding. The kitchen spun. "Sign the damn paper, crack." He hit me again, harder this time. My lips split against my teeth. I tasted warm, copper blood. I slumped in the chair, dazed, my ear ringing with a high-pitched whine. Through the haze, I saw Vanessa standing back with her arms crossed. She was smiling. "Good," she said calmly. "Finally. You put your wife and your future first. Aaron grabbed my hand and tried to force the pen into my fingers. I pulled back, sliding off the chair and hitting the cold linoleum floor. He loomed over me, raising his fist for a third strike. Vanessa stepped forward, reaching down to grab my hair. Then the world exploded. Boom, boom, boom. The front door shook violently on its hinges. Police open up now. The scream from outside shattered the domestic nightmare. Aaron froze, his fist still raised in the air, his eyes widening in sudden, terrifying realization. Before Aaron could land that third blow, the front door did not just open, it crashed against the wall with the force of a battering ram. Daniel and two uniformed officers flooded into the tiny kitchen. The scene they walked into was damning. I was on the floor, clutching my swelling cheek, blood trickling from my lip onto the linoleum. My son stood over me, his fist still clenched, his face twisted in a mask of animalistic rage. One of the officers moved with terrifying speed. He grabbed Aaron by the shoulder, spun him around, and slammed him against the refrigerator. The sound of air leaving Aaron's lungs was followed immediately by the metallic click of handcuffs. "You have no right!" Vanessa shrieked, backing into the corner, clutching her designer bag to her chest. "This is a private residence. You don't have a warrant." Daniel stepped forward, calm amidst the chaos. He held up a folded piece of paper. "Actually, Mrs. Doyle, we have an emergency protective order and a surveillance warrant authorized by a judge this afternoon based on suspicion of elder financial abuse. And now, we also have assault in the first degree caught in the act." Aaron was struggling against the officer, his face pressed against the cold steel of the fridge. He craned his neck to look at me, his eyes wide with a sudden, pathetic desperation. "Mom!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "Mom! Tell them it is just a misunderstanding. I didn't mean to hurt you, I was just stressed." I looked at him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a dull, throbbing ache in my jaw. I searched his face for the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. The boy I had starved myself to put through college. He was not there. In his place was a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obstruction to his bank account. The second officer helped me to my feet. He looked at my bruised face with gentle concern. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges against your son for assault and attempted coercion?" The kitchen went silent. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall and Aaron's ragged breathing. I felt two opposing forces pulling at my soul. One was the memory of rocking him to sleep when he was sick. The other was the stinging heat on my face where he had slapped me because I refused to be homeless. I straightened my back. I looked straight into his eyes. "Yes," I said clearly, "I do." Vanessa turned on Aaron instantly. "I told you," she hissed, her voice venomous. "I told you not to let her drag us down." "You idiot. You ruined everything. You are not going anywhere either." "Vanessa," Daniel said, cutting her off. He tapped his phone. "We have the recording from the car. The conspiracy to liquidate the house and flee the state that makes you an accessory to fraud." Just then, we heard the clatter of heels running up the driveway. Judith appeared in the open doorway, breathless and pale, her coat thrown over her pajamas. She must have been waiting in the car down the street. "What is going on?" she screamed, looking at the handcuffs on Aaron. "Unhand him. This is just a family disagreement. You cannot arrest people for a family argument." Daniel turned to her, his expression cold. We also have your voice on tape. Judith, referring to Mrs. Doyle as the dead weight of the past while discussing how to drain her assets. You will be hearing from the district attorney regarding your involvement. Judith's mouth snapped shut. The colour drained from her face as she realized her money could not buy her way out of a recorded confession. The officers began to march Aaron toward the door. He twisted his body, tears streaming down his face now, a messy, ugly display of regret that came far too late. "Mum, please," he begged, sobbing. "I will pay it back, I swear. Just tell them to stop. Don't let them take me." I stood in the center of my kitchen, holding my side. "You had that chance." "Aaron," I said, my voice flat and final. "You had that chance for years. Tonight is my chance." They dragged him out into the night. The heavy wooden door closed, shutting out his cries through the window. I watched the red and blue lights of the cruiser sweep across the dark lawn, illuminating the weeds I had never had the money to clear. Then, the cars pulled away, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. When Daniel and the others had finally gone, the house felt enormous. I was alone. I walked to the sink and wet a paper towel, wiping the dried blood from my chin. Then I turned back to the table. The cheap vanilla cake sat there, untouched. I struck a match and lit the single candle in the center. The flame stood tall and bright, burning away the shadows. "Happy birthday, Maggie," I whispered to the empty room. "From today on, you are no longer a walking wallet." I blew out the candle, plunging the room into darkness. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of the dark. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you folks are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Maggie's decision. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people.